Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, February 1, 2026. Time in Texas, about 7 p.m. It appears that we've had at least a strong, verifiable 5 flares from the sun. And some sources put forth that there's a possibility of a Carrington event. I wouldn't disagree with that. So I'll go into that with you. Some of the sources I'll use: NASA Space Weather, YouTube Space Weather, formerly Suspicious Observers, BPEARTHWATCH, Wages of the World, Stefan Burns, Plus. And we'll also cover what's going on then. Could we see we're seeing major sun activity. Could we see a major impact in the economy cycle and also in the war cycle? I don't dispute that either. So first we're going to cover what's going on the sun. So we have sunspot 4366. That put out earlier this morning 3 flares. We had an M7, an X1, then we had an M6. Now, about 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon, Texas time, BPEARTHWATCH put forth from his sources, and by this time, this afternoon, NASA has shut down. So BPEARTHWATCH put forth that from a different sunspot, we had an M6, and then Wages of the World, about 6 or 7 p.m. Texas time, put forth that we had, from his own equipment, because NASA is shut down, that we had an X8 flare. So that's going on. And we see NASA shut down. Maybe they'll try to give us the information in the morning. This is leading, so all of this sun activity is giving us a radio 4 level warning, where the top of the Earth's atmosphere is ionized. This takes down radio communication, ham operators, and so on. So this is believed to impact, so we have Africa, we have South America, we have the southern Atlantic down to Antarctica. So this is the part of the world with their comms being affected. And we have this. So we had Stefan Burns, he's a geophysicist, put forth the possibility of a Carrington event. Now, the Carrington event was caused from solar flares, 1800s. At that time, our level of technology was primarily telegraph wires. Many of the operators of the telegraph were actually electrocuted with that solar activity coming through the wires. That Carrington event took down all telegraph wires worldwide. So a Carrington event on the modern Earth could take down our satellites, internet, cell phone, TVs, radios, and so on. Carrington event. Now, the Carrington event is believed by experts to have been caused by an X flare of a strength of 45. Now, that when the Carrington event occurred in the 1800s, we had a full strength electromagnetic shield around the Earth. Today, around the Earth, we have our shield down. Officially 30%. My suspicion is it could be as much as 50%. So if we go with the thinking that it's down 50%. That would mean to bring about a Carrington event, we would need something like an X flare of 23 to 24. Now, we've had these flares today. If we add them up, we've got an X1, an X8, an M7, an X flare equals an M flare of a 9.9 plus. So if we add M7, M6, and BP's flare was an M6, so we've got 12, 13, 6, 19. So 19M would give us about a 2X. So we can see X2, 3, 8, 11. So a strength of 11X would give us about 1/2 of what could theoretically cause a Carrington event. So I believe my supposition has value that the original Carrington needed an X flare of 45. Since our shield is down, and I believe it could be as much as 50%, I submit a 1/2 value of the original Carrington, requiring an X flare of 23 to 24. So we see this combined solar activity we had today would give us about 1/2 of this value, or 1/4 of a Carrington event. We are having, and I believe if the flares continue, so we had this morning 3, we had the M7, X1, M6, about 4 to 5 o'clock we had an M6, according to BPEARTHWATCH. And then about 6 to 7 p.m., we had an X8 flare from Wages of the World. If this continues every several hours, so now we're seeing a periodicity of 3 to 4 hours, another flare, 3 to 4 hours, another flare. If this continues through the night, then all bets are off, baby. We need to pray against this. So that's going on with the sun. And with the sun, I believe that with extreme activity on the sun, that we will see an impact on the economy, stock market, and also the war cycle. Now, Hal Turner has a source with BlackRock. BlackRock is a deep state transnational corporation that I don't know the percentage of assets BlackRock owns on a worldwide basis, but it's likely as much as 30 or 40%. So BlackRock, as an economic indicator, is worth listening to. And the source for Hal Turner said, when the stock market opens today, look at the futures activity, and that we could, after this week, see a dramatically changed economy in the U.S. and in other nations. Now, I would couple this. We have some sources who are talking about now decreased stock on grocery shelves. Well, let's be logical. We just had this massive 1-2 Arctic blast hit the U.S., so I believe that transportation and reshelving, restocking system has been impacted. It could be a possibility that we'll see less stock on the shelves. We know in the past year to year and a half, a good source that brought this out was Canadian Prepper, that even, I think he said, the Canadian military and the U.S. military were contacting him to buy up prepping stock he had, food, water, medicine, like that. But that's also coupled with, I know Hal Turner had information. I believe other prepping sources had information too about the U.S. Military in the past 1 to 1.5 years going to manufacturers such as Campbell's and buying all of their canned goods in their plant before they were put out to go to stores. And that I had other sources where the U.S. military was also buying up at the manufacturing level canned goods, frozen goods, and so on. So that I put forth has happened. Now, could it be that the U.S. government, the U.S. military, and other militaries and governments are projecting ahead for some space event or some war event that would cut down on supplies on Earth? I submit absolutely that would be possible in my mind. But I know that these things have occurred. Now we're seeing today this influx of strong solar activity that appears to now be occurring every 3, 4, 5 hours so far today. So I think it's good to have cash and food and water and medicine on hand always, and be prayed up. As Hal Turner says, get right with God. I believe that's true. Now, what are we seeing going on? So that's the economic indicators from BlackRock and other sources for grocery store shelves in the U.S. What do we see going on in the war cycle? I put forth that the U.S. activity against Venezuela is also tied to Cuba and to Iran. And it appears that the U.S. Likely will go hot with Iran, possibly later tonight. I know that today they moved that was one of their carrier strike groups that had been off the coast of Oman. So we have Oman, we have Iran, there's water. They moved the carrier strike group from off the coast of Oman to further out into the Indian Ocean. Military analysts suspect this was just to put the carrier in a more favorable position out of the range of the Iran missiles. And we have this coming out. Venezuela was the site of Cuban intel operators and also CCP operators. And I believe the number one enemy of the U.S. is CCP. But they operated out of Venezuela to overturn the U.S. presidential election in 2020, but these software and hardware companies Venezuela's engineers made the computer software. The CCP made the computer hardware, then brought it into Venezuela, where there were operators from Cuba and from the CCP and from Venezuela to overthrow the U.S. presidential election of 2020. And this computer vote flipping organization have been overturning votes for about 20 years. They just made a serious mistake when they overthrew the 2020 U.S. presidential election, and then in the next presidential bringing into office was the same person who was cheated of his presidential term in 2020, President Trump. Venezuela, Cuba, China, Iran, and other nations, your time is up. So yeah, and President Trump, we believe, is backed by God and the American people. We have no problem with the U.S. taking military action against Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, and let's not forget China. So that's going on. The Venezuelan engineers held patents on the software, Smartmatic. The CCP held patents on the hardware for the Dominion vote counting machines. And we see that Delcy Rodriguez, currently in power in Venezuela, at the largesse of President Trump, she continues to be the head of the Venezuela government, as well as the head now of the Venezuelan cartel, Los Solores. So, hey, Delcy is on the hot seat, I believe. And it's believed that this vote-flipping machine, Dominion, the Smartmatic software, and all these engineers, computer engineers, for the past 20 years had been paid for by, get this, the U.S. government via USAID, and there were certain groups within the U.S. CIA who worked in collusion with this group of deep staters to overthrow elections. So yeah, that's going on. And we know that President Trump, through Doge, defunded USAID. And we have this. Oh yeah. So this morning, the FBI and the Las Vegas police took possession of, I believe it was 2 houses. One house apparently was living quarters, and the second house was a bioweapons lab located in Las Vegas. And so that happened, and of course, all the people that went in wore their hazmat, level 4 hazmat suits, because it was a bio lab. And it's tied to a secret CCP biolab that was taken down about 6 months ago in California. Now the FBI has tied these 2 biolabs together because the property in California and the properties in Las Vegas are owned by the same LLC, a company that's owned by the CCP. The raid on the biolab in Las Vegas, you know, they've just taken the stuff in to possession. They'll have to take it to labs and test it. But they've already done that on the material they picked up 6 months ago in California. And some of the hazmat materials they found included HIV and malaria. So that's going on. And we have this. Yeah. BlackRock says, expect a dramatic economic event this week in the U.S. And we have this. President Trump, we know on Friday, also put out a national emergency order for the U.S., declaring Cuba to be an enemy of the U.S. So we see Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran being tied together because also the foreign nations that were involved in the overthrowing of the U.S. presidential election in 2020. Venezuela, Cuba, China, Iran, and some segments of the Russian, I don't know whether these players were in the Russian government, but they were Russians operating out of Russia. It's possible that this Russian group could be separatist from both the Russian government and the Russian military. That's unknown to me. But there were other foreign nations involved in this overthrow of the U.S. presidential vote. And as I said, the deep staters didn't anticipate that President Trump then would win the next U.S. presidential election and bring out his tools to dismantle the deep state. But that's going on. We do need to be in prayer for what's going on in Iran, which could present certainly challenges for the U.S. military. So it's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.